think you or your partner might struggle with low self-esteem? Watch today's video. I'll go through some common signs of how low self-esteem might show up in your relationship. My name is Diana Garcia. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, owner of a private practice called Nurturing Minds Counseling. All right, let's jump into today's video. Okay, so one sign is that you don't really trust your partner, and that can look different ways or how that actually shows up. Meaning, maybe you just don't trust that they're being faithful or loyal to you. Maybe you don't trust that they always tell you the truth, or maybe you don't trust that they really want to be with you. And how that can actually show up is maybe you feel jealous when they're at work and at a work event, a work trip, around certain family or friends, right? So that can show up as well. Maybe you need constant reassurance. So you need, you constantly bring up this sense of not trusting them. So you need them to kind of tell you that no, they are being faithful, that you can trust them. Maybe that shows up as just you, again, constantly feeling insecure or doubting kind of your partner's loyalty, faith, doubting what they say to you. So just that constant sense of insecurity, whether they truly want to be with you or they're truly kind of showing up to the relationship the way you think they should, or they're being loyal, or whatever that looks like. This can also look like, depending on the relationship, can also look like some controlling behaviors, right? So whether there has been some past instances of infidelity or not, controlling behavior can look like constant need to know where they're at, needing them to check in with you all the time, needing to check their phone, go through their social media. Again, that any type of kind of controlling behavior, making sure that you tell your partner they can't go somewhere or they have to be home at a certain time. Obviously, in a relationship, there's compromise and there should be healthy communication about what each partner is doing. But controlling behavior is really when the other partner feels like they can't do certain things without maybe triggering the other. The other one feels like anxious or uncomfortable, insecure, so has a need to control. Clearly, in the extreme sense, like when we think of someone being insecure and controlling, it could also look like some concern about like verbal or physical abuse, and that's kind of on a different lens, right? I'm not really preferring or talking as much about that, but clearly that can also show up in those kind of instances as well. Another sign is maybe you're afraid to bring up concerns, right? So maybe because you don't trust kind of that your feelings are valid or your perspectives are valid, or you think that your partner's needs are more important than your own. So you just don't bring up things, whether they're minor concerns or bigger concerns. It can also be related to just being avoidant. You don't like conflict, so you tend to avoid it. You rather maybe sweep things under the rug or just deal with them. And honestly, I'm not necessarily saying that every single thing needs to be brought up. Like ultimately, you get to decide what that is. But really acknowledging if there's a pattern of instances of wanting to bring things up and you know that it's kind of bothering you, but you're kind of afraid, you just don't want to rock the boat. And so you'd rather just kind of figure it out, keep it in. But over time, that could build resentment. Or maybe you just notice that then you have an argument about something that's kind of unrelated, but all of a sudden all these things are coming up because you've never dealt with them. You never even expressed that you're bothered with your partner, so their partner's completely clueless. All right, the next sign is really this fear of abandonment. So I just want to clarify that, of course, when you're in a relationship, for the most part, it is normal to want the relationship to work out, right? Obviously, if the relationship's going well and it's healthy, this concern that you are afraid that, the relationship will end. But when I think about like fear of abandonment, it's this like intense fear that your partner is going to leave you and you're going to end up being alone, right? And that fear at times feels kind of magnified, or that your mind will just kind of bring up that fear in instances where maybe it doesn't even kind of make sense with the situation that's happening, right? So this fear of abandonment really shows up in kind of all these different instances. Maybe you've had a minor disagreement and all of a sudden you're afraid that your partner's going to leave you, whereas your partner's thinking, like, we just had a disagreement, chill out. Relationships have disagreements, they're allowed to happen, right? But this fear of abandonment really drives a lot of the things that you do, right? So that can also be related to this fear of conflict, this avoidance of conflict, not bringing things up because ultimately you're afraid that your partner is going to leave you. And if they leave you, that fear of being so alone or that something's wrong with you really feels uncomfortable, right? Because you believe that if you're alone, something's wrong with you, or you can't handle that, or that you need someone else to be okay. Clearly, most of us like to be in relationships. We like that interconnectedness. That's a normal need for connection, but acknowledging that there's other ways of seeking connection outside of romantic relationships. But also when this fear of being alone is the reason you're in a relationship, then maybe that insecurity or that fear is really taking over. Another sign is that you really tend to overthink situations. So again, if you're not feeling completely secure in the relationship because of your own insecurities, right? That you maybe start to look at certain situations and you overthink it and you kind of tend to think worst case scenario. Whereas if maybe you share that with a friend, your friend's like, no, that's not what shows up for me. And again, I don't really like to think like, your friend's perspective is wrong or yours is right, or vice versa, your friend's is right and yours is wrong. But really acknowledging if you tend to notice that you look at a situation and your filter tends to be where you assume that something's negative, right? So again, let's say your partner leaves to work and then, you know what, you sent them a message, but they haven't responded to you. And it's about 2 hours later, they still haven't responded to you. And then your mind tends to think, oh my God, something's wrong. Maybe they are still upset about something I said a week ago. Or maybe, you know what, they did give me a weird look and that's why they haven't responded. Maybe they're thinking of ending the relationship. Lo and behold, finally your partner responds, is like, oh my gosh, I really got stuck on this work thing and I couldn't get to my phone. I was really overwhelmed. Had nothing to do with you, right? So again, but in that moment, your mind grabbed that situation that could have gone either way, right? But your mind tends to automatically assume that it's like overthinking a worst case scenario. And again, that's just what your mind's doing. But then you believe it and you get really hooked by it, right? And then it causes you a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of overwhelm, and you get really stuck there. Another sign is that you really tend to compare yourself to your partner's past relationships, whether that's one relationship, one major relationship, or multiple relationships. But you really notice a desire to want to know more about your partner's past relationships, really getting into the details, right? Because again, it's normal to a certain degree when you're meeting someone, getting to know them, that they have a story and history, right? And that history includes other people before you, right? Vice versa in your case as well. And you tend to notice that you have a desire to really want to know more about your partner's ex, to know more about that individual or more than one, and really tend to compare yourself. And that comparison can go either way. Maybe if you have a lot of insecurities, it could look like you compare yourself and you find yourself lacking in whatever case, whatever kind of criteria you're comparing yourself to: appearance, success, intelligence, whatever. Connection with your partner, that you really compare yourself to them and think you're less than. Or maybe you compare yourself and you put yourself on a pedestal and feel much better. But even so, right, that you tend to really notice a desire to focus maybe at times obsessively about past relationships and wanting to know more or get more details to feel better about yourself. Or if you really think that you're less than, to like really get this weird confirmation that you are less than. Another sign is that we really present or pretend to be someone we're not, right? So, of course, when you first meet someone, it's normal to want to kind of really put your best foot forward, maybe kind of present the best version of yourself. But when I'm talking about maybe a little bit more of an extreme where you present to be someone that you're not, right? So, let's say you know that your potential person you're dating is really outdoorsy, but you're not really outdoorsy, but you try to like fake that you are. So you say, yeah, I go on hikes every weekend, or yeah, I bike every other weekend, or yeah, I do like triathlons, or whatever the case is, right? But that's like nothing you even want to do, right? And you really tend to not just like exaggerate slightly, but you really kind of get in the weeds with it and say that you are someone that you're not. And then we take it to the extreme that then you continue to hold on that facade the more you stay with this person, right? So you continue to say, oh yeah, I really do like these things, when you really don't. Another sign is that maybe you're hypersensitive to any feedback from your partner. Look, I'm being honest, I don't really like when my partner tells me something that I don't do right. It's hard for me sometimes to look at that. And when I'm saying hypersensitive, meaning that like it's really hard for you to take any type of feedback that your partner gives you, even when they're approaching it in the best way possible, right? Clearly, if your partner is being really critical or harsh, it's normal to get defensive. But even if they approach it in the best way, or even if it's not meant to be negative feedback, just like kind of neutral feedback about a situation, that you automatically take it as criticism and negativity, and you feel like you're being attacked, and you feel less than, you feel really shamed in that moment. So if you tend to struggle with low self-esteem, that can also look like at times really having a lot of experiences of shame, not feeling good enough for whatever reason. And so anytime that someone's giving you feedback in the context of your relationship, that tends to be triggered, right? Even in instances where it's like your partner's not saying you're a shitty person, right? Hopefully, right? Your partner's just saying like, hey, hon, I really wish you would do X, Y, and Z differently, right? But you can't really hear that because you really struggle at times with that feeling of shame. Another sign of low self-esteem in a relationship is if you really notice that you've completely let go of all the things that are important to you. Again, it's normal when you first meet someone, you're in the relationships, early relationship stages, that of course there's going to be accommodations. You're going to spend clearly less time with other people in your life because you're spending more time with this individual. But what I'm talking about, where it's to the extreme that all like you've like ghosted your friends consistently, like the things that are important to you you've stopped doing, you've stopped going and spending time with your friends, or going to the gym or hobby or whatever the case is, pretty much that you've completely let go of everything in your life and focused everything on this relationship, and vice versa, that you kind of have the expectation that your partner does that as well, and if they don't, that kind of bothers you, or you feel like that maybe they're not as committed to the relationship, whereas they just want to continue to have some healthy level of independence, right? So again, if you tend to notice that tends to be pretty extreme for you, and that you can kind of notice that in other relationships, that might be a sign of low self-esteem. Let me know in the comments below which signs really resonated with you when I was going through some of these examples. Which were the ones that you were like, ooh, I kind of tend to do that. And I want us to be really clear. I don't want you to shame yourself or make yourself feel like crap, because that's not helpful. Just acknowledge, like, what are the signs that you really tend to do? Because that's going to be a great starting point for you to start to change those behaviors, which you can really change those behaviors. So one thing I really want to talk about, it's okay if you're engaging in some of these behaviors. Now, I definitely clearly some of the controlling behaviors or anything like that's maybe unhealthy for your partner, like you're impeding their safety, that's a little bit different. I'm not talking about that again. But again, if you're engaging in any of these behaviors, I just want you to be really clear in acknowledging that there is a reason why, right? There's something that's happening underneath the surface for you that's driving these behaviors. There's certain thoughts or feelings, or maybe a history of trauma or other instances of relationship trauma that is driving some of this insecurity and how that's showing up in this relationship, and you have an opportunity to do something different. So if this is something that you're really struggling with, I encourage you to check out my website, schedule a free consult if you're in Florida, or if you just want more resources, you can subscribe to my email newsletter. That's where I send kind of most of my resources first, really the best recommendations, what I'm reading, what I'm reviewing, kind of worksheets, things like that. And as always, whatever you need to do, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul. In future videos, I'll go through some tips to help you manage some of these behaviors when they're showing up in your relationship. All right, guys, I hope you have a good one.